Sportsline Podcast approaches the weekend on CHCH. Thank you so very much for checking in. I'm Bubba O'Neill. As you know, this podcast is a space for the many extraordinary athletes, coaches, executives, and broadcasters that may have gotten their start right here in the Golden Horseshoe and made their mark nationally or internationally. From his days as a color analyst on CHOW at the old New York Penn League's Welland Pirates, this fella was really passionate about being a broadcaster. Through his journey, he reached the top and rubbed elbows with some of the very best in Major League Baseball. In addition, he was the voice of reason for so many fans that needed to discuss their feelings on the Fan 590's Jays Talk Post Game Show. Currently, he's still giving us the straight goods about the Blue Jays as a columnist with the Toronto Star, and he is the host of the Deep Left Field podcast. Mike Wilner, always a pleasure to have you on the podcast. How are you, partner?
I'm doing all right, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Oh, how was your off season, your week off of baseball, I guess that would be. How was that? Get away for a little bit?
Yeah, just a little all-star break, 4 days worth. We'll take it. It's nice to have that little breather in the middle of the season. And, with the Blue Jays having been on a 10-day road trip before that I wasn't on, I haven't had any FaceTime with these guys for 2 weeks. So it really feels like baseball has gone away for a little bit. But, it was a frustrating trip to watch, so the breather was nice for everyone, I'm sure. I took my kids to Chicago for 3 days. We had a great time, and now it's time to get back to work, but very much a different kind of work than we thought it would be in the second half going into this season.
Well, let's bring up the master. I'm going to be master of the obvious. 44 wins, 52 losses, translating the last of the American League East. They're 14 games behind the division-leading Baltimore Orioles, 9.5 out of the last final wild card spot in the American League. Now, you and I spoke in April, and based on your preseason projections, where is this team underachieved, Mike?
No, where hasn't it underachieved? Is the better question. This is a team that was supposed to contend for the division title. This is a team that was supposed to be among the best in the league, that was supposed to take those last couple of playoff trips and turn it into a season where they get at least a playoff win, if not win a playoff series. And part of that is making the playoffs. But they're not going to do that barring some kind of real miracle this year, because for the first month the starting pitching was wonky. For the first 3 months, or almost 3 months, they didn't hit at all, and then the bullpen fell apart, and now you've really, the offense has started to come around, but now with 4 of your top 5 relievers not available, whether it's been because of injury for 2 of them or ineffectiveness for the other 2, they can't hold leads anymore. So, back in the middle of June, this was, if the offense would only get up to league average, if they could only score 4 runs a game, they would win so much more often. Now they got to score 10. And in the last game before the All-Star break, they blew a 7-0 lead, and they still wound up winning that game. That wasn't the bullpen. That was Yusei Kikuchi falling apart in the 5th inning. But, 2 of the 4 losses on this road trip were games that they had the lead in the 8th inning, and they lost because of walks and wild pitches and handing the other team these victories. And the Blue Jays had one of the best bullpens in the major leagues last year, and now they have one of the worst. And you just can't win with a bad bullpen. And the problem is that they had already dug themselves a hole by the time the bullpen started really leaking oil, to the point where there's no point in giving up anything that might help you in the future to try to get a bullpen arm that will help, because the hole they've dug is too big to climb out of, and the more they don't help it, the deeper the hole gets.
And it's been painful. It's been painful for media types. It's been painful for fans, most importantly. We're all watching these games, right? And as you said, some of it has been poor performances. Some of it has been untimely errors at the wrong time, lack of hitting with runners in scoring position. You could go on, and then you explained so much of what we've already seen through this unofficial first half of the season. And it's the losses are so painful. Of course, when the directors are shooting the game, as you said, wild pitch that scores a winning run, and then the camera flashes to the manager, John Schneider. Like, how much of this is his fault? Like, is he going to bear the responsibility, the brunt of what we've seen, and injuries included?
I hope not. I mean, and you're right. Like when we're talking about watching a game on TV, every time that the Blue Jays mess up, every time that a pitcher walks somebody or throws a wild pitch that scores a game-winning run, the camera flashes to John Schneider for his reaction. And I think a lot of the people watching think that the camera flashes to John Schneider because it's his fault. And it's not his fault. Like, I don't think any of this is his fault. He's doing the absolute best he can with the tools that have been provided to him. It's not his fault that George Springer was the worst hitter in the major leagues until the end of June. It's not his fault that Bo Bichette is the worst hitter in the American League right now. That Vladimir Guerrero didn't start hitting home runs until the middle of June. That Jordan Romano and Jimmy Garcia are hurt, that Chad Green was hurt, that Eric Swanson and Tim Meza went from two of the best relievers in the major leagues to two guys who lost their jobs because they pitched so poorly all year. It's not John Schneider's fault that the front office doubled down on pitching and defense after seeing what happened last year and didn't add any significant power. None of that is John Schneider's fault. And, if John Schneider pays the price for this, that is an incredibly cowardly act by Mark Shapiro and Ross Atkins. Ross Atkins is already fired. Well, I was going to say Ross Atkins has already fired two managers, but Ross Atkins and Mark Shapiro are tied together. They work together. This isn't Ross Atkins has autonomy to do some things, but the big moves have to go through Mark Shapiro. And, you're allowed to fire a manager or two. You're not really allowed to fire three, because at some point, you have to start saying, well, I'm hiring the wrong people here, or I'm putting together a team that nobody's capable of turning into a consistent winner. If you keep firing managers, the glare keeps going higher and higher. And this is absolutely the front office's fault, the way this team has performed and not having the proper contingency plans for what's happened. This is not on John Schneider.
Well, it's funny that you talk about this and players that are underperforming. And in sports generally, when someone underperforms, you got this saying, next man up. Well, the next man up, in terms of their best prospects, people from the minor leagues, they're already with the team right now. And the big word, and I'm sorry, I don't watch too much AA and single A baseball, but is that the farm, these players that are supposed to come up and help the team, the cupboard's empty, and there's not a lot of players there. So at some point you have to restock, and that's any sport. So with the trade deadline coming up at the end of the month, if we take Vlad and Bo out of the picture, what are your expectations? Are there pieces that can help this team be better in the future?
Yeah, I think that theory of restocking is a little overstated. I mean, when you look at the Orioles and the Astros and the Cubs, and those are the three most recent examples, those aren't teams that restock the cupboard really through trade deadline deals, with the exception of the Astros picking up Yordan Alvarez for a marginal middle reliever. Those are three teams that restock the cupboard by being really, really really bad for a really long time, for spending like half a decade being laughing stock bad, if not more. And they drafted well for the most part. They did some smart things with their first round draft picks. They saved a lot of money. They didn't pour it into the team later. They started to spend normally later, but they basically stunk for six years, made their owners a lot of money, got a few first-round draft picks, and then got good again. The Blue Jays aren't going to be able to restock the farm at this trade deadline. Like, look at 2019, which is the last time they sold off. The Jays made 5 trade deadline deals. They traded Marcus Stroman. They traded Daniel Hudson and David Phelps out of the bullpen. They traded Eric Sogard. Can't remember the other one. They traded Aaron Sanchez and Joe Biagini.
That's pretty good, Mike.
Nothing. They got nothing. They got 7 prospects, 2 of which flamed out of the major leagues and made fewer than 30 appearances for the Jays. They got 3 who never made it, and they got Simeon Woods Richardson, who turned out to be half of the Jose Barrios deal. So that's all they got for trading making 5 trades at the deadline. They got Derek Fisher back, who is a punchline for Blue Jays fans who remember his brief tenure here. So you're not restocking any farm system by trading Yusei Kikuchi and Danny Jansen and Justin Turner. But it's also overstated that farm systems need to be restocked. Teams don't get, superstar players coming out of their farm system in multiple years. If you get an everyday big leaguer every couple of years out of your farm, you're doing really well. But the Yankees have never restocked their farm system. The Dodgers have never restocked their farm system. The Braves have never restocked their farm system. These are teams that just win consistently by being smart, making the right moves. And, one of the problems is that when Mark Shapiro and Ross Atkins came to town, they talked about having this farm system that replenishes the major league team and that consistently replenishes itself, and they used the term waves and waves, so wave after wave of prospects coming up, and their idea was that there would be 3 or 4 players, legit big leaguers, coming up from the farm system every few years to help make this team consistently a championship contender, and that hasn't happened at all. There are players on the farm, one hopes, who will help, but it's a flawed premise to put too much of your hopes in what's coming up from the minor league system. The better thing is to have major league players who can produce, and to go out and get major league players who can produce, whether it's using tools from your farm system to get them or otherwise. But I don't think Toronto has the stomach. I don't think Rogers has the stomach for 4 consecutive 100-loss seasons. And even if that happens, you have to draft well, and that's something that this regime hasn't done at all.
All right. Well, the 2 pieces that they did get right, and I think one of them really has nothing to do with Atkins and Shapiro. So we'll start with Vladimir Guerrero Jr. I mean, there's talk of a contract extension. There's been at least rumors or reports that there has been conversation, but of course nothing has been done. I'll go back a couple of years where he once said he would never wear pinstripes, and in an interview with a native tongue, he kind of said that he would do whatever. Like, he's kind of softened his stance. So where are we with Vladdy? I mean, and you talked about his season, just so un-Vladdy-like for the first 2 months. He's kind of come back, probably got a little confidence being at the All-Star game. Where are we with Vladdy? Does he want to be here?
Absolutely, he wants to be here, and I think he wants to be here for the rest of his career if they can make it work, but he's not going to give any kind of hometown discount to stay here. And the biggest problem with Vlad is trying to figure out his value, right? I'm sure he wants to be paid like the guy he was in 2021 because he believes that that's what he can be on a regular basis, but he's never been that on a regular basis. He was that guy in 2021, and then he was nothing like it in 2022 or 23 or the first 2.5 months of 24. So the question is, how do you find a number contract-wise that makes Vlad happy and makes the Blue Jays happy? They always talk, the Blue Jays always talk about sharing risk, and there are players who can go out on the open market and have to share a lot less risk with other teams than the way the Blue Jays might value or calculate risk. So I don't know how you get a number for Guerrero that everyone is happy with. And I think that's a reason that a contract extension hasn't been signed so far.
But isn't there a team like the Yankees or the Dodgers that, can't afford, and they say, look at Vladdy and look what he did in 21 and just say, you're worth $50 million a year. And I don't know, will the Blue Jays even match that?
Nobody's ever been paid $50 million a year.
It's coming. It's coming. It's coming.
Yeah, it's coming for someone who can hit like Shohei Ohtani and who can play defense like Mookie Betts. I don't think it's coming for Vladimir Guerrero Jr. But the Blue Jays can afford anything. Rogers is among the richest owners in the game, if not the richest owner in the game. They just and lately they've said, here's the money. Do what you want with it, and that's the perfect kind of ownership, is the one that just gives you dough and stays away and doesn't try to meddle. The problem is that Shapiro and Atkins haven't spent it properly. I think there's certainly a possibility that a team can come and overwhelm Vladimir Guerrero Jr. with money. It's still a year and a half away. We'll see. The Blue Jays still have the opportunity to discuss contract with him exclusively up until that point. But the closer you get to free agency, the likelier you are to test it. But yeah, I do think that there's certainly a possibility that a team just comes in with a truckload of money and backs it up to Vlad's house and he takes it. Sure, anybody would.
What about the other piece? I mean, the other guy that was supposed to be the cornerstone of this franchise for a decade plus, and that's Bo Bichette. And I don't know how you feel about this. I'm really curious for your take. I thought from some of the words that were said during spring training that when Bo went to arbitration, Bo Bichette we're talking about, went to arbitration, it felt like there was kind of a dark side of a relationship, maybe some kind of tension with the franchise and himself. He has not played well, and we have seen him have bad starts and then have an amazing second half of the season. We've seen him start hot and then slow down. To me, when I look at him, even his body language kind of looks negative. Do you think there's something going on with him and his relationship with the Jays?
Well, just first of all, they didn't go to arbitration this year. Bo signed a 3-year deal last year with the Blue Jays last spring to avoid arbitration. Okay. And, they got together on a deal. So there certainly aren't any hard feelings about that. I don't think he's happy. I don't think he's happy with the way he's performing. I don't think he's happy with the way the team's performing. I don't think he's happy with the way anything's going on this year with the Blue Jays. I don't think he was happy last year with the way the team performed. I don't think he was happy with missing so much time in the last 2 months of the season. And every conversation I had with him in spring training talked about how he rededicated himself to be in better shape to avoid the injuries that knocked him out last year, that he felt like he wanted to be more of a vocal leader, more of a voice in the clubhouse than he has been in the past. I don't know how that's gone over because, there's there are a lot of things that they don't let us see. I know he's widely respected in there. There's no question about that. But yeah, I don't know how you can be happy when you're having the year that Bo Bichette's having, and when the team's having the year that it's having around you. You know, he's here to win, and he and Vlad were going to be the focal points of a team that was building towards a peak that they were supposed to reach this year and next. Like, these were the years for the Blue Jays to do their greatest amount of damage with Vladimir Guerrero Jr. and Bo Bichette on the team just before they reach free agency. And instead, this is a team that's gotten worse every year since 2021. So I can't imagine he's happy about any of it.
Yeah, it's just been, I don't know, because you always think of Bo and Vladdy, their partnership as sort of team leaders, and for the most part in their careers, there's been smiles on their faces. But we've seen, the sulking from Vladdy. Bo we've seen him verbally throwing gloves. It's been at least a couple of times I can think of. It's strange to see your team leaders in that kind of mindset at this point right now, and I just don't know where they go from here with these guys.
I don't know if it's strange to see it when they suck. I mean, we have people who I've heard over the years many times, fans complain that they look too happy when they're losing. So you can't have it both ways. You can't be upset that they're upset when they're losing and also be upset that they're smiling when they're losing. I think that they're both incredibly frustrated, and everybody around this team should be incredibly frustrated because nobody had them in last place at the All-Star break and out of a playoff race and being sellers at the deadline. This is not what anybody signed up for.
Okay, I'm glad you brought up Rogers Corporation here. I don't know what you think. I know you are a regular at the games. I would presume that this team is not going to make the playoffs, and they're not going to make a wild card, and they are going to be sellers at the deadline. I don't know what Toronto, as their fandom, how they take all of this. We do remember days of 15,000, 18,000 at the stadium. They've spent close to $400 million on ballpark renovations. Rogers cannot be happy. I have not heard from them. Now, we have heard from Atkins talking, and I mean, you've been in those scrums. I've been in a couple. You've been in all of them. I don't know what I get from him. I've heard from Mark Shapiro once. I didn't really get anything. I mean, fans want to hear what's going on. Is there someone from Rogers that maybe needs to step up? They cannot be happy with the investment and what the return is, Mike.
Well, I mean, attendance is still fine now, right?
Now. But what happens in September?
Well, I guess we find out in September. But I think a lot of seats have already been sold, probably, and I think a lot of this renovation has been to make the ballpark a place to be where a baseball game is going on, as opposed to a place to go watch the baseball game. So, there are still a lot of people who come to that ballpark not to watch the game, just to party and to drink. And a lot of big league ballparks have sort of moved that way in their changes and in their renovations. So I'm not suggesting the attendance is going to be high regardless of how good or bad the team is. I don't think that's true at all. But maybe instead of going back to the days of 11, 12,000 when they stink, we go to 18 or 19,000. And a lot of it depends on how many eyeballs are on the game as well, like what the viewership is, and that generates a ton of revenue for Rogers.
Mike, I see those numbers. Well. Mike, I see those numbers. They're not great. They're getting beaten. They're getting beat by the CFL every once in a while these days, which we haven't seen.
Yeah, we haven't seen that in a long time, and I haven't seen those numbers. So I'll obviously, you've got a better idea of that than I do, and I think that will be concerning to them. The TV numbers dropping and attendance dropping, if they, and we'll see where they'll keep the payroll if those things happen. We've never heard from Rogers, right? They've always spoken through the president of the team, whether it's been Mark Shapiro or Paul Beeston or Paul Godfrey. So I don't expect that Edward Rogers is going to come out and say, this has been a huge disappointment and these guys have a lot of explaining to do and all that stuff. I don't think that the level of bloodlust from the fans is going to be satisfied that way. It is disappointing not to have heard more often from Mark Shapiro. Apparently, he is going to speak in August in a rather, a regular media scrum like the ones we see Ross Atkins do every once in a while. And I think he wants to keep his distance and not be seen as micromanaging the baseball operations department, whether that's true or not. And I think he wants to avoid that level of spotlight. But the question, when are we going to hear from Rogers, is we may not, because we never really have. And I think that hands-off ownership is kind of a good thing because, far more often than not, when you have owners who are meddlesome and who think that they know the baseball side rather than just the business side, that's what gets a team in a lot of trouble.
Is there a world where there's a Shapiro and no Ross Atkins?
There better be. There better be, because I don't necessarily see Shapiro leaving after this year, and I can't imagine how Ross continues after this year.
Wow. Just a couple quickies for you, Mike. Here. Looking at the fun part of baseball, the Baltimore Orioles, as he's talking about, what a great story they've been, and they nice little battle going on at the top of the American League with the New York Yankees, who raced out to that lead, and now the Orioles, I think, a game or two ahead of them. Is it the Orioles going to the World Series, or do you see anyone else in the AL going there?
No, I would never make a prediction about who goes to the World Series. I mean, look at what happened last year, right? The best teams in both leagues got knocked out in the first round.
Yep.
There's no one who wouldn't have said it was either the Dodgers or Atlanta going from the National League, or Baltimore, or I don't know, I guess Houston or Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay won 99 games going to the World Series from the American League, and none of them got out of the first the division series round. Winning in the playoffs has nothing to do with winning during the regular season. That's how you had a 90-win team from one league and an 84-win team from the other league in the World Series last year. It has more to do with chance and luck and who's hot than anything else once you get to the playoffs.
It really certainly has been. And the Phillies, what do you think about the Phillies? Like in the National League, I know the Dodgers spent all the money, they got Ohtani and whatever, but it seems like to me, at least at this point right now, the Phillies are playing real good ball in the National League.
Phillies are a really good team. Yeah, absolutely. They've got incredible starting pitching. They've got a phenomenal offense. They can catch the ball. They're a fun team to watch, and they have that sort of cool vibe about them that you kind of wish we had here. It's a really, really good team. And Dave Dombrowski, over the course of his entire career, wherever he's been, starting in Montreal, has put together really, really, really good baseball teams. And it would be great to have him back in Canada. What can I tell you?
One last thing here, Mike, and I don't know how you feel. I should have started off with this because I don't know how you feel. I don't know how invested you are. I generally don't get too invested in anything all-star. But watching Teoscar Hernandez win the home run derby, what were your thoughts there?
Good for him. I'm a huge Teoscar Hernandez fan. The guy has a great time. He's got a ton of power. I called his first major league home run back when he was playing for the Houston Astros. Just happened to be in Toronto against the Blue Jays, and called a lot more over the years. I think it's great. I don't understand why there are Blue Jays fans who are upset with Teoscar Hernandez winning the home run derby, or who consider it a knock against the front office that he did it as an LA Dodger. Teoscar Hernandez was a free agent last season. Anybody could have signed him. The Blue Jays apparently made an offer, but it wasn't as big as the Dodgers offer, and LA wound up getting him. I think when they traded Teoscar Hernandez, it was the right move at the time. That wasn't necessarily followed up with the proper trickle down moves. Like they, replacing that bat with Brandon Belt's bat was probably a mistake, but they needed to get better defensively and they needed to get better in the bullpen, and they got a guy who was one of the best relief pitchers in the major leagues last year for 1 year of Teoscar Hernandez, and they also used the money that the difference to probably sign Kevin Kiermaier, who was the best 9-hitter in the American League and a Gold Glove quality center fielder. So, yeah, I'll make that trade given the team's needs 1,000 times out of 1,000. I advocated over the winter that they should have brought him back to DH, and I still think that they should have, because the major league environment right now, you need home runs. It's very difficult in a 245 hitting league to string 3-4 hits together to score runs. You need the big blast, and the Blue Jays have certainly suffered for the lack of it. But Teoscar Hernandez winning the home run derby at the All-Star break is not an indictment of the Blue Jays for trading him 2 years ago. No.
I think people just kind of felt like, I think the fact that Chris Swanson's, what is he in AAA right now? I think the people just look at the obvious and they're like, hold on a second, he was us, and there's guys in the minors. It just adds to the vitriol, as you well know, because you did Jays Talk for so long, of how Blue Jay fans are feeling right now. It's just a really kind of queasy time. But I mean, as you said, there's so many interesting things that we could see by the end of the month with the trade deadline. And Mike, you've been fabulous as always, giving us the straight goods, and we really appreciate it. Conversations with you are real, they're awesome, and we certainly learn from some of your expertise as well too. So thank you for joining us.
Yeah, I'm happy to do it. I appreciate it. And look, there are a lot of reasons to not like what this front office has done. But there's no need to grasp at straws when someone who used to be here does something good and make that another reason to dislike them when there are plenty of real ones. I'm always happy to be here. I appreciate the invite for sure.
Thanks, my man. Appreciate it. Have yourself a good second half of this unofficial second half of the season. Well, that's your Sportsline podcast for the day. And as you just seen and heard, we love talking sports. If you do know of an athlete, team, or event to promote the Sportsline podcast, you want to hear from you. Please hit that thumbs up, like, and subscribe button. And if you have something to say, we really appreciate those comments. For the outstanding people that make the Sportsline podcast possible, thank you so very much. And we'll see you next week.